So here I am, blissfully gliding through the air, getting ready to land. I don't know it yet, but in just 100 seconds or so, I'll be on the ground, I'll be severely injured, and I'll have exploded a vertebra. So I still actually have 70 seconds or so to make my situation better. But I don't know that, I don't feel in danger, everything seems to be fine. So why am I going to soon crash like an idiot? Because I am being an idiot, I am being complacent.
Complacency.
A feeling of quiet pleasure or security, often while unaware of some potential danger, defect, or the like. Self-satisfaction or smug satisfaction with an existing situation, condition, etc. Because yeah, let's remember, paragliding, it's a branch of aviation, of aeronautics. It's like a dangerous activity, it's sophisticated, it requires skills, and it requires judgment, excellent pilot judgment, and appraisal of conditions, and of changing conditions at all times. So complacency, when you stop doing that judgment, it's a common enemy in aviation. It's the cause of many crashes. But let's go back a bit, and actually quite a bit, two weeks earlier in the same valley. So I landed here. Now I've landed at quite a few places in this valley. It's a tough valley to navigate. Landing options are few and far between because it's Japan, it's not far from Tokyo. Like every single square inch of land, it's something. It's a school, it's a house, it's a garden, it's a field, it's a road, and there are power lines like everywhere. But anyway, here I was landing, and it's not a place that I had actually scouted before. So I was wary of possible rotor caused by like some steep river cliffs and ridges to the east, and the wind comes from the east, so I don't want to be like on the lee side of that. So I want to keep my space with that. And the wind comes from the east. It's, as always, it's a familiar valley. It's a familiar pattern. And so I want to stay as far away as I can from any rotor generating obstacle. I want to have clean air to be able to land smoothly and safely. So I'm examining fields to the south of the river. They look perfect. Like I spent a really long time checking for power poles and power lines. I can tell where the power lines are. I can see there's an open space to land. It just happens to be on fields, but we're just the beginning of spring and most fields have not been planted yet. So I get ready to land there, but then I see that the fields are actually, they've been planted. And so if I land there, I could be like really inconveniencing farmers, making them work more. It could be a PR disaster for my paragliding school. So I go for plan B because I had a plan B. It was just to land deeper on the riverside. And I go there, I land very smoothly. But then after landing, I pack all of my equipment and I realized that I need to climb a cliff to get back like to civilization. And I end up actually having to ford the river because that cliff was just too difficult. And I forded the river on foot with all of the equipment on my back. I almost get carried away by the flow of water. It was terrifying and you know, somewhat traumatizing. So, you know, like there was this experience and it's actually going to be relevant to my crash. But note that already I had a lot of things to think about for landing spot choice not related to safety. And here it was whether would be damaging fields, causing more work for farmers, or a potential PR disaster. That's something I'm thinking about. And ideally, I should only be thinking about how to land safely. But that's not really possible here. So let's go back to the crash. Because, yeah, this is a familiar valley. Wind is from the east. The whole flight was wind from the east. And just a couple of minutes before landing, the wind is still from the east. So there's still a chance of rotor from that ridge a bit to the east of me, but then I should already be shaken by that if that's really happening. So everything right now is smooth. So I should be fine landing on the riverside. And anyway, the riverside is really my only possible landing spot. So I'll have to land on the riverside. The wind is from the east, and that's basically the end of my analysis. It should not be. So because I will then have fossilized my assumption, and I will stay on this assumption that the wind is easterly, everything is as usual, and I'm no longer analyzing the conditions that could have let me know what is happening. I mean, if I just opened my eyes and looked at the terrain, I would know what is happening, but I don't yet, and I just stop my analysis. I'm no longer flexible, mentally speaking. And so instead of analyzing conditions, I'm thinking about what would be the best spot to land so I could have easy access back to civilization. And this goes back to my trauma, really, of having to cross a freaking river to get back to civilization last time. So I think the far end of the river side would be a good choice because I see there's a path. And it's small, and I see there's a tent there, so there are people there. What should I do? And I'm thinking about that, and I don't realize that while I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking about where I should be landing based on factors that have nothing to do with safety, and I don't realize that the wind, from my point of view, has switched to a south-southeast wind as I was losing altitude. And just looking at the terrain, I should have expected it. So I don't realize that my landing spot will be directly on the lee side of an obstacle. And if you look at the lay of the land, at the terrain, it's obvious. The wind is forced into a curve in the valley, compressed between mountains, accelerated via venturi. So basically I'll be landing into venturi lee side and associated rotor. But I don't realize it because I haven't spent the time analyzing the situation. I've immobilized myself, mentally speaking. I've done, my conclusion is foregone, eastern wind as usual, and I'm no longer flexible, and I don't realize that the wind has changed. So, I don't realize anything until I start getting shaken. Now, on the video, it looks mainly like pitching movements. In real life, I remember feeling completely and suddenly overwhelmed, and I was fighting to maintain even pressure to prevent the collapses on my wing, fighting to damp rolling and pitching movements, and I was completely overwhelmed. And also because of that, I was completely stressed, and my arms went stiff with panic. So, which means that I was, my muscles were tight. I was no longer flexible to really feel and smoothly feel and listen to my wing as usual. I wasn't able to do that anymore because I was just so stiff. And that's really a secondary cause of the crash. I was no longer feeling my wing through the controls. And then we get to the final cause of the crash. I get the final pitching close to the ground. It surprises me. I flare to counter that. That's the proper reaction, really. But I'm like 0.5 to 1 second too late, and I don't flare strongly enough. And while I'm still really the weight of the pendulum, I smash into the ground. And because the wind is a mess, it really turns me while I'm flaring 90 degrees, and that's straight into a small incline of the riverside. So that really helps with the disaster. It completes it. But really, the main cause of the crash and of my injury is my complacency. And it's because it was a familiar spot. I was traumatized by something else. I was not thinking about safety. And, I don't see myself as a skilled pilot, but I do see myself, or did see myself, as a safe pilot, as a careful pilot. And that actually played against me because then it allows me to feel comfortable with myself and to be complacent. So if you think of yourself as a safe pilot, as a careful pilot, think again. Don't grow complacent. Think about your previous flights. Have you grown complacent about your landings? Have you grown complacent about the conditions you launch in because you're a careful pilot? That's very, very important. Because if you don't do that, the result could be this.